because, I don't know, I do enjoy learning about this stuff. So, Foodopoly, what it's essentially referring to is the monopoly on our food system in America. And there was a book written by, I can't think of her first name. Her last name's Hodder. What is her first name? Here, I'll look it up.
Sorry, I can't help you.
Hang on. Let me look it up. Oh,
That's all right.
doesn't matter. Anyways,
Doesn't matter.
book named Foodopoly, or called Foodopoly. It really just focuses on all of those issues. So I did start to read it. I got about 100 pages in before this paper was due. So needless to say, I didn't read all 400 pages of it. But yeah, I got part of the way through it. So that it was interesting. Some of it went over my head, but that's all right. So basically, what it's talking about is how few choices we actually have to choose from in the food industry, and there are actually only 20 food corporations that produce and supply most of the food consumed in America, and that includes organic food. So kind of surprising, I guess, to read about this, where you think like, oh my gosh, there's endless amounts of stores that you can go to. If you travel, you'll see different grocery stores in different states, different food products on, the shelves of every grocery store. The choices seem to be endless. But in actuality, it's not. There aren't that many choices. More than half of grocery store sales originate from only 4 big box retailers, including Walmart. And according to the Food and Water Watch, the top companies controlled an average of 62.8% of the sales of 100 types of groceries. And in 30 categories, 4 or fewer companies controlled at least 75% of the sales. And in 6 categories, the top companies sold more than 90% of the category sales. So again, when you really break it down, the little guys don't really have a lot of the pie, if you will. It's the big companies that are really dominating the market. So with, these big box retailers controlling the vast majority of the grocery industry, and consolidation continuing, it really comes as no surprise that there's fewer food companies producing the majority of the products at these retailers. In 2012, over half of the money spent on groceries in the United States went to the 4 largest retailers, which are Kroger, Walmart, Target, and Safeway. The average consumer isn't even aware that this consolidation exists in many cases. So if you look specifically at Kroger, they've over the years acquired many small grocery chains such as Dillon's, Fred Meyer, King Soopers, and Smith's, just to name a few. Not really brands that are familiar in this area, but even though these smaller chains are owned by Kroger, Kroger bought them out, they still keep their own store name on the storefront. So consumers are kind of led to believe that they're getting away from shopping at the big box retailer and supporting the little guy, if you will, but not even necessarily realizing that they're all owned by Kroger. Nobody, well, I should say nobody, but a lot of people don't realize that. So with more and more consolidation, there's less competition, and that allows the retailers to charge consumers more. And interestingly, manufacturers are kind of doing the same thing, food manufacturers, kind of tricking consumers in a similar fashion by basically selling multiple brands of the same product. For example, you look at like Tide and Gain laundry detergents. Those are both sold by Procter & Gamble. So again, consumers are led to believe that they're choosing among competitors when actually they're just choosing among different products that are sold by the same company. So the choice, you get a choice of scent, but you're not really choosing amongst brands per se, or companies that are supplying that brand. So even farming has become big business as well, where it's almost impossible for small or even mid-sized farming operations to survive. So you take, for instance, the average income of a medium-sized farm, and that including government subsidies is just over $19,000 a year in average income. So really hardly anything that they're making. And this lack of income is essentially forcing a lot of these multi-generation family-owned farms to have to sell out and, sell it to the larger industrial-sized farms. And then these large-scale farming operations only encompass 12% of the United States farms, but they make up 88% of the value of farm production. So again, these big industrial farms, there's not many of them, but they're really dominating the market. And along with these small, medium farms disappearing, so too are the communities and towns in those rural areas, because now there's only one farm, for 1,000 acres or whatever it might be, versus 25 farms with 100 acres each per se. So, there's no need to have a community in those areas anymore, so they're becoming ghost towns in the Midwest. It's also resulted in, the consolidation has resulted in farmers receiving even less of a percentage of the money that is spent on food, and then alternately consumers are paying higher prices as a result of that. So it's kind of interesting how that's panning out. Food manufacturers are finding that focusing on expanding their business with large box retailers is resulting in higher profits for them, making the manufacturers that supply these large retailers more powerful. And as these manufacturers continue to grow and consolidate, there's less opportunity for small manufacturers to get in the door of these, grocery stores, because the small manufacturers can't meet the contract price, or may not be able to afford the low prices that those big box retailers want to sell their product at. In fact, slotting fees that retailers may charge the food companies are most typical with new products or new brands, and those slotting fees can cost over $2 million. So if you're just an up-and-coming brand, you've got to already have millions of dollars to get into a lot of these stores in the first place. And then not even with that, if they do manage to get into one of these stores, if a manufacturer gets into one of these stores, they're very likely to be bought out by another one of these larger manufacturers. So, again, a lot of what I found in doing the research is that, a lot of the smaller brands that you think you're buying at the grocery store, I wouldn't say local, but smaller brands or organic brands, natural, whatever, they're all owned by all these bigger businesses or bigger food manufacturers. So it's crazy. Like, I buy Kashi cereal, for instance, and I'm thinking like, I'm being healthy. Not that it's not healthy, but smaller brand, maybe supporting a new and upcoming brand. It's owned by Kellogg's. You can't get away from it, it feels like. So, and that's kind of the premise of what I was researching, is that you think that you're supporting the little guy, but you're actually not in a lot of cases. So, with profits being the driving force, many food manufacturers are shifting their products to be more processed and, have ingredients that require less of the nutrient-rich and pricier ingredients and more of the cheaper filler ingredients that are calorie-dense and little nutritional value. And these low-nutrient foods are heavily marketed since they generate the most profits. And they also, are part of what's fueling the growing obesity epidemic, because they're sold at a cheaper price and they're advertised more, So, again, it's only hurting us, I guess you could say. And these lowered standards, are kind of put to blame by the Grocery Manufacturers of America. And that organization has essentially allowed a lot of the dangerous preservatives and additives and colorings to be used in food. They've really not helped the food industry, if you will. They've kind of weakened food safety regulations and promoted genetically engineered foods. So, we haven't gone in the right direction with them. Even recent labeling initiatives, like the facts up front you might see on cereal boxes, isn't without controversy, because it's basically used more as a marketing ploy than an informational tool. So, as such, food manufacturers will be more inclined to show the benefits of their food rather than focus on the negatives. So it's easy to promote an unhealthy product as being healthy by simply focusing on the few nutrients that product may contain. So, for instance, if you have an artificial juice, you might promote the fact that it has 100% daily dose of vitamin C, but you're not really mentioning the fact that it's very high in sugar content, or it doesn't even have any natural fruit juice at all. And, with that being said, there's been, obviously, again, the growing obesity epidemic, and, just how the industry itself is, oops, is my time up? What is that? Okay, sorry.
That was my watch, probably.
That's
it, Martha, you're
if
done.
I'm going off on a tangent, you just raise your hand. But there have been studies by New England Journal of Medicine showing that child's chance of obesity increases by 60% for every soda that they consume. So that journal basically proposed to have a penny tax per ounce on any soft drinks that are sold. But this caused the American Beverage Association to kind of fight back, and they formed the Americans Against Food Taxes Coalition, and they spent millions and millions of dollars on lobbying against federal and state initiatives of this sort. And it includes members of the soft drink manufacturing industry, fast food chains, convenience stores, also the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Corn Refiners Association, members from there, as well as Cargill. So just kind of an example of how, if food manufacturers don't like what, being regulated, if you will, they're going to fight back. They've got, so much power in the industry that they will, fight back. Yeah, I guess it's just, I don't know. I went into a few more political examples, but it is interesting just to see, how much power there really is in the food industry, how much they're manipulating the market, I guess you could say, if, these big retailers and the big manufacturers, they've got a lot of play, and right now, we don't have a big enough voice, I guess, and I feel like, consumers are suffering, farmers are suffering, and it's unfortunate that basically the only way I can see it being resolved is to get the government involved to regulate it. But then, the government has to control it, which kind of sucks. But I don't know how else it needs to happen, because it truly is. It's becoming a monopoly. I mean, you look at, Becky and I work in the food industry, so of course we see the mergers happening regularly. It's constant. We get reports on it. We have to adjust our systems on it, and it's nonstop. So it's just continuing to happen until somebody stops it, and I don't know what else will except putting some regulations against it. So.
Well, I want to thank you, Martha, for having the courage to take this on, because it is it's a sensitive issue. Like a lot of environmental issues are sensitive. But I really give you a credit for having the courage to look into it. This somewhat dovetails to Todd's presentation on food deserts, and I don't think I think you can connect some of the dots between your report and his report just by looking at the migration of the larger food distribution entities moving out of the areas which aren't profitable for them. So, this Food and Water Watch is an advocacy group in Washington, and they're not off the wall. I think it's important for us as critical thinkers and as educated people to look at the picture from a lot of different perspectives. So I appreciate you sharing the material that you did with us.
Sure, and they have a quiz on their website too if anyone's interested. It kind of shows you how much you know about the food industry, and I found out I think I got like a 50% on my quiz. Like half the questions right, half of them not right, and most of the ones I got right were lucky guesses, so it was interesting.
Well, and you work in the industry, so just imagine some of the rest of us that don't. We'd probably score far less than that. There was a very interesting book interview today on Wisconsin Public Radio. They interviewed somebody that wrote a book called Natural Profits, and that also is a kind of a follow-up to the food industry and what's going on with, what's going on with the whole natural food industry and organic products. And just because a package or a product says it's natural doesn't necessarily mean that it has some of these artificial ingredients in it. There's a lot of
labeling.
Regulation a lot of labeling and regulation that has to take place. Yeah. And this gentleman that wrote the book worked for a Whole Food Systems, and he said that his intention writing this book was to inform people that there's a lot more education that has to take place in the whole marketing area in the food industry. And it's coming, but it has to take on an educational thrust, as well as some regulatory thrust. Did you have a question?